When a mind wanders to the same imaginary stories every day, what is it actually looking for? A woman paces her bedroom, lost in a vivid wedding that isn't actually happening. Writing for Psyche on 9 June 2026, a child psychologist suggests these mental detours are more than just idle distractions or symptoms to be managed. The specific scenes the mind builds, whether they involve sudden fame, romantic rescue, or simple safety, often act as a map for hidden needs. Decoding the recurring themes in a fantasy can reveal exactly what a person is missing in their waking life, turning a private habit into a surprisingly practical tool for self-repair. Written by Vada Bawarchi in Psyche, narrated for Ava. Alone in her bedroom, Nida closes her eyes and crosses into another world. Music blares through her headphones as she begins pacing back and forth, slowing and quickening her movements to the changing rhythms of an invisible scene unfolding in her mind. She pictures friends and cousins dancing around her. Fairy lights begin to glow, casting shadows across the lawn outside her home. She mouths the words to imagined conversations with wedding guests, family, loved ones, celebrities. Here, in this sweeter-than-reality dream, she is a glowing bride, surrounded by lights and laughter. A substantial portion of our waking lives, perhaps as much as 50%, is spent in mind-wandering. According to a paper by the researchers Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert at Harvard University, people are thinking about what is not happening almost as often as they are thinking about what is. We may find ourselves confronted with images that seem to arise spontaneously. We may envision possible futures or become consumed by ruminations about the past. Or we might, like Nida, deliberately conjure delicious worlds in which we are more successful and more loved. For most people, daydreaming is not a problem. In fact, it can improve our lives in many ways. Mind-wandering appears to be closely related to creativity. Daydreaming, then, might allow us to stumble onto buried emotions or new ideas, and writers and artists have long found breakthroughs in daydreams. Imagined futures can also allow people to test possibilities without immediate risk, and imagined perspectives can support moral reasoning and social understanding, allowing us to explore ways of being kind or resilient. A Harvard study on mice from 2023 suggests that daydreaming might even shape the brain itself by contributing to neuroplasticity. Problems arise when mind-wandering undermines focus on critical tasks, or when imagination becomes the only reliable site of fulfillment. There are many studies that have shown how drifting thoughts can negatively affect attention, mood, memory, and academic performance. It turns out there is a cost to thinking about what is not happening. In some cases, when mind-wandering begins to impair daily functioning, it can become pathological, requiring professional help. Yet even when daydreaming becomes maladaptive, its content and intensity can be powerful guides pointing us towards the places where our attention and care are required. Daydreams may return again and again to particular themes: relationships, recognition, threats, regrets, desires, fears. Are they trying to tell us something? And if they are, how can we learn to pay attention to the messages rising from our unconscious? The idea that daydreams might be communicating something important becomes especially relevant in cases of extreme mind-wandering. I have encountered such cases in my role as a child psychologist at the hospital where I work in Karachi, Pakistan. These daydreams interest me because the fantasies offer comfort or temporarily relieve emotional distress. The content and intensity of these troubling daydreams may reveal something important to the dreamer. Immersive forms of daydreaming can involve extended, vivid inner narratives. These fantasies are often emotionally rich, recurring, and accompanied by bodily movement or sensory imagery, the warmth of an imagined sun or the feeling of being in a crowd. At the far end of this spectrum lies what the clinical psychologist Eli Sommer termed maladaptive daydreaming, MD, a pattern of excessive, compulsive fantasy that can interfere with daily work, study, relationships, or self-care. People with MD frequently describe elaborate inner lives that feel more compelling than everyday reality, as in the case of Nida and her vision of becoming a bride. MD has not yet been formally recognised in diagnostic manuals, such as the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and its boundaries remain contested. Research suggests overlaps with ADHD, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and dissociative symptoms. Two individuals with similar profiles may daydream in radically different ways. The seeds of such daydreaming are often sown in childhood. MD is consistently linked to early emotional adversity, and many individuals report histories of loneliness, bullying, trauma, neglect, or chronic stress. A child who experiences adversity might sit in class, eyes fixed on the board, while her mind drifts elsewhere. Or they may lie awake at night, weaving stories that feel safer than sleep. At first, these imagined worlds offer harmless distraction, but the fantasy can quickly become something deeper, a place to find comfort and recover a sense of control. Studies indicate that there may be shared patterns contributing to MD. Soma, together with his colleague Nirit Sofa-Dudek, have suggested that factors such as attentional regulation and high fantasy proneness can increase susceptibility to immersive inner lives. Other research has proposed the possibility that there may be biological contributors, particularly among those with hyperdopaminergic brains that experience chronically elevated dopamine activity. Yet neither shared patterns nor biological vulnerability explain why particular fantasies recur, nor why they take the forms they do. Two individuals with similar profiles may daydream in radically different ways depending on their histories and social environments. The content of their dreams matters. The dominant clinical approach to maladaptive daydreaming has focused on symptom reduction, limiting the triggers that invite mind-wandering and learning to redirect attention when it strays. These strategies have real value, especially when functioning is severely impaired. But applied in isolation, they risk overlooking what the daydreams could be saying. If a person's daydreams reliably return to scenes of love, success, or safety, this suggests that something more than poor impulse control is at stake. A young doctor may repeatedly dream of becoming the finest physician in the world, of receiving awards on a global stage. Beneath the fantasy lies a hunger for recognition from family and friends. A young boy may picture himself fighting the bullies at his school, performing spectacular feats of strength. Outside the fantasy, he feels weak and ashamed. Paying attention to the mind-wandering without addressing the underlying deprivation leaves the need intact. So what is the alternative? The answer is straightforward to describe, but sometimes difficult to practice. Importantly, it doesn't apply only to people with MD. Anyone who daydreams can benefit. Ask the younger version of yourself what she needed, then allow your adult self to respond. Begin by noticing patterns. What tends to happen just before your mind wanders, and what seems to prompt it? Perhaps you have had a fight with a colleague. Perhaps someone ignored your attempts to spend time together. Next, attend to the emotions and roles that shape the fantasy. Is the dream giving you a feeling that is otherwise missing from your waking life, a sense of being admired or safe? Consider also the themes at the centre of the daydream. If it turns on friendship, this may point towards a need for relational repair or expansion. If it centres on competence or visibility, it may be calling for situations in which your skills and effort are genuinely recognised. Armed with this understanding, you can begin to consider how certain unmet needs might be addressed more directly. If your daydreams are particularly intense and you wish to explore them more deeply, writing can help. Try composing a letter to the younger version of yourself from the time when you first recall experiencing the kind of daydream you're interested in. You can ask her what she needed, then allow your adult self to respond. The psychotherapist Susan Anderson has described how this kind of dialogue between the inner child and the present self can begin to mend the loneliness or longing beneath some fantasies. I once worked with an adult who had begun daydreaming as an adolescent. She repeatedly dreamed of being popular and loved. She longed for a kind of affection and emotional attunement that was absent from her relationships with caregivers and friends. Unable to share or name this vulnerability at the time, she retreated into her imagination. The fantasies grew intense and recurring, and they persisted into adulthood. Rather than attempting to extinguish the dreams themselves, in therapy we focused on addressing the needs of her younger self. In time, the loneliness driving the fantasies began to ease. She and I did not seek to recreate the fantasy in reality. Our goal was to honour its message through small, grounded gestures, and to attend to needs and desires that had gone unacknowledged for too long. Mind-wandering is neither straightforwardly good nor bad. It might be better understood as the mind's way of directing our attention to core needs. Our fantasies are sometimes organised around what matters most to us, even when, or especially when, we have not yet found the words for what those things are. Whatever kind of daydreamer you are, the key is not to banish daydreams, but to remain in dialogue with them. What is this dream asking for? What would need to change in your life for this fantasy to lose its particular hold on you? These are, in my experience, some of the most productive questions you can ask if you're interested in understanding your daydreams. Nida paces in her room. Her steps rise and fall with music only she can hear. But she is not merely dreaming. She is remembering something her soul longs for.